Welcome to You Matter in Business. Your hosts today are Ariel, me, and Miriam.
Your heart, your brand story, and your success because you matter in your business.
Before we start this episode, I wanted to give you a quick thanks to Miriam for taking care of the interview with Megan today because I was unavailable. Sometimes we have to do family first, and we all know about work-life balance. So I apologize to Megan. I really wanted to be here for this interview, but here they are, Miriam and Megan.
Welcome back to You Matter in Business podcast. And today I'm on my own. I'm flying solo without Ariel this week. But I am really excited that I have a special guest with me this morning. And she's a lovely young lady called Megan Schirnhofer. And Megan, like me, is British. And so what I'm actually going to do is because you never introduce someone as well as they introduce themselves. They're the expert on themselves. So good morning, Megan. How are you?
I'm good, thank you, lovely. How are you?
Yeah, I'm really good, thank you. So I wonder if you could possibly introduce yourself to our audience and tell us a little bit about yourself, where you grew up, how did you start out in your career, and where you are professionally right now.
So I grew up in Cornwall, a little place in the bottom of the UK or down south. Every time I speak to anyone in the States, I'm like, unless you know the UK well, you won't know where I'm from. We just have the best beaches and everyone comes here for a holiday in the UK, and that's
Yeah.
about it. But yeah, so I grew up and I always had a plan. I left school, went into college and did music, and I was a self-employed musician from 17. Around all of the bars, hotels, local holiday parks, which we have loads of down here. So that was amazing. But it took off so well, which is obviously great. I was gigging 5 times a week and I started having some health issues with my voice. And when I say I had a plan, this is one thing I wish I'd learned sooner, which was to really expand my knowledge and where else I could maybe flourish into what else would like sort of tick my boxes, because due to that health issue I then had to take a step away from singing full time and I could no longer do it. And so to fast forward to where I am now, there's a lot of stuff that went on in between. I jumped ship a few times to get where I am now, but technically I am self-employed, but I am with a client full time or almost full time. And what I do is marketing and client relations, essentially, and produce a podcast. So we have our own podcast. We're in the leadership development realm, and it's super exciting. It's an Australian company. So we speak to people worldwide, and from the little girl, the little country girl in Cornwall, I'm totally
Country
spreading
bumpkin.
pumpkin. So yeah, it's good fun.
Awesome. Well, fantastic. So I obviously met you, Megan, way back when I lived in the same village as you in Cornwall. But I've watched your career and I've watched your development on LinkedIn and social media sites, and I think that you've got a story that some of our listeners would be really interested in. So that's why I've invited you onto our podcast today. So let me ask you a few questions, and let's explore your background a bit more. So, what have been some of the challenges that you've experienced along the way, both professionally and personally? So, obviously, you've already touched on your journey with your music, but how have you overcome those challenges?
Yeah, so I had to think about this. There's a lot I think I've faced in my 28 years, and one that really stands out most. And I don't think many people would say this, but a challenge around trust. And from myself being so trusting in others, I wear my heart on my sleeve in everything I do. I think everyone has my best interests at heart. I'm not sure where it comes from. Maybe a little naivety, just trusting in everyone. And it reminded me of this story, a time when I was employed and my manager really overstepped the mark. I became very close to that manager and confided in her with a lot of things, personal things, things with my mum, like health. And I then found out that there were other people in the office talking about that. And I'd only told her. And it was in that moment, I was like, gosh, I'm in my mid-20s and I've just learned that trust is so valuable and you should not give it out lightly.
Mm-hmm.
It's one of the biggest challenges I faced, and then like throughout the rest of my career I faced it again. There was all sorts of things: ageism, sexism, being a young female in the corporate space and entering that a little bit later in life. I, again, a little naive. There was a lot of learning curves to that. I thought a lot of women had my best interests at heart. They were gossiping behind my back. It was almost like being back in school. I must admit the majority of it's been great, but those are a few things that sort of stand out to me, is particularly female leaders and females in this space, which is a bit sad, really.
So how do you think that you overcame that? How did it change you in the corporate world?
Thicker skin comes to mind, having skin. And really just, people say it all the time and it's so cliche, but you have to look out for number one. Like, I very much like to support others and watch them on their journey. I was a careers manager for a little bit in education, so I get a really rewarding feeling from helping others. And I think that comes naturally to a lot of us. I don't think I'm, unique when I say that. But also do what feels right for you, but do not expect anything from others, because some people are willing to give and others are willing to just take.
I think you're right, and I think that's a learning curve that a lot of us have gone through, and maybe, making people earn trust, don't they? And it takes a bit of time before you can fully trust people, and it's a shame that you've discovered so early on that. That not everybody can be trusted. So many women suffer from the fear of criticism. We talk a lot on this podcast about fear of various things. But one of them is fear of criticism and being judged by others, particularly in relation to themselves, putting themselves on social media. Now, I know that you're really good with social media, and people of your generation tend to be a little bit more au fait with it, don't they? But so have you ever experienced criticism or trolling online? And how have you handled that situation?
I think for myself, trolling more maybe when I was younger, not so much now.
Uh-huh.
Online can be a very lonely, silent world. And I think sometimes when I was younger and posting, and I say younger, maybe even a few years ago, I was still feeling this way. If I wasn't getting the engagement or the likes, that almost felt like, just a punch in the gut when you'd worked so hard to put something out there and people weren't recognizing that, people weren't engaging with that. That felt a little bit personal. More so recently, I've really changed my mindset, and I still have moments where I look and go, gosh, I didn't get as many views as I thought it would. But I use social media as my diary. And I love that when you change your mindset and you think about something from, I'm just doing this for me. I really don't care if anyone likes it or anyone engages with it. I don't know where it's going to go, but I'm doing it because I'm finding enjoyment out of it. And I use it as my online portfolio. It's my resume. Like, LinkedIn is so powerful. I do not know where my career is going to take me. Networking and LinkedIn has brought me to where I am now, which is amazing. Like I say, an Australian company, a global company, so things like that don't just land in your lap. It's so much harder to apply for jobs online. So to be noticed, I used online space, I used networking, and I really created an online portfolio that people around me were noticing and seeing what I was doing. Doesn't mean they have to engage with it for me to feel validated or get approved in that sense. I'm doing it because I don't know what's around the corner. What door open.
Just take a moment for a slight interruption. We wanted to share some exciting news.
Exceptional women professionals often struggle to communicate their expertise. Rediscover, refine, rebrand women's retreats provide a transformative, intimate experience that help clarify your unique identity, so you are self-confident and courageous, stand out in your industry, and enjoy effective marketing.
Join us on one of these retreats. Go to arielfaith.com and choose your date that fits your schedule. Reserve your exclusive spot with a simple deposit, and then enjoy tailored planning tips and details from us to get ready for this inspiring experience. In the meantime, if you can like, share, and comment on this podcast, we'd appreciate the love. Thank you.
And that's absolutely fascinating. Last week on this podcast, we talked about LinkedIn. So we'd done a series of podcasts on, the first one was Facebook, then the next one was Instagram, and then last week was LinkedIn. And we talked a little bit about the differences between those social media. But for you to use it as a diary, as your portfolio builder, that's really fascinating. That's a different way of using it. And I think you're right. I think we all strive for those clicks, don't we? We all strive for those likes, that those people following us, and comments, and visual affirmation that, you know, what we've done has resonated with them, and that's that in itself. Even the silence is we take it as criticism. You know, if we don't get those likes, if we don't get those clicks, it feels like we can take it personally. So what we've talked about, the importance of balancing authenticity on our website and maintaining those professional boundaries. So how do you approach that in your career, maintaining that feeling of authenticity and maintain those professional boundaries? How do you do that?
I'm unapologetically me.
I love it.
And I think sometimes it not gets me into trouble, but again, a bit younger, maybe a bit naive going into this space, that trusting people, I'm just very much me. And I think one of the best skills you can learn in life is to really know your audience, know who you're talking to, feed off their energy. What sort of persona will you bring forward? And it's not to say that you fake yourself in a certain scenario, but there are some people I've definitely been just Meg, and I don't know if they know how to take me. I'm very open and honest. I'm very much just like say what's on my mind. There's not a lot of filter, and that's all well and good when you're having a chit chat like this. But if I'm in a corporate space with, you know, 6 other executive leaders on the table, maybe I should, you know, pull myself back a little bit. So it's not losing my own authenticity, but it is learning to read the room. I think is a really important thing there.
And you're
And
absolutely right. And we've talked about that on this podcast. And it's actually about emotional intelligence. It's about being self-aware, but also being socially aware as well. And you're right, reading that room. But emotional intelligence is also about relationship management. And that's exactly what you're doing, is being unapologetically Megan, and so you should be, but also knowing how to make sure that you've got those professional boundaries there, that you kind of can temper you in order to fit in with your surroundings, and get the best out of the other people in the room as well, because even though you're being you, you're still building those relationships with them. I love it. That's great. So we talked about on our website, on our podcast, about having a growth mindset, and viewing failures as opportunities. And I've heard you on this subject on LinkedIn. I know you've recently done a video about this, about talking about viewing failures as opportunities. So have there been mistakes that you've made yourself or have seen others make that have influenced the way that you do things and the path that you've chosen?
I had a phone call with my mum the other day, and I'm going through a current sort of transition in my life, really focusing on self-care and wellness. And one of the things I've noticed is to really take note of my triggers. And something, popped up the other day. I rang my mum, vented to her, and I said, "You know what, mum? I think I have an addictive personality." And I know it sounds like I'm going on a tangent here, and I didn't really want to admit it out loud, because I always think when people talk about having an addictive personality, it's, we associate with being addicted to the wrong things like drugs and alcohol and having some sort of abuse around that. And for myself, you talk about emotional intelligence. I started reading about that the other day. Then I bought like 5, 6 books on it, and I sat every night going through it. I heard that Wim Hof breathing is amazing. So 100 miles per hour, I'm running at it, and I'm doing all of the Wim Hof breathing next to my partner late at night. And he's like, "What is going on? Like, I can't keep up with you. You're just like all over the place." And so when I think about it, I'm like, they are good things. They're for my wellness, my mental health. Like, they're all great things for me. But the problem with that, and what I'm learning, is you can go 100 miles per hour at something, and then you crash and you lose interest and then you give up. And it's this vicious cycle. I saw touching on feedback, and I have the quote here, but it was Stephen Bartlett, and he put failure is feedback, feedback is knowledge, and knowledge is power. And I think that's one of the best lessons we can learn about ourselves is what are our triggers? What are we sustaining and what are we not sustaining? And try to figure out like, why is that? Where does that come from? And I think for me, it's like I say, it's having that trait of an addictive personality, but it's also pressure on my own back to feel like I have to do these things. I have to keep up with these things because I'm on this path of nurturing myself and doing all things great for me. And the minute I stop or slow down, I'm giving up on me. I'm not being productive. And it's how do I change the mindset to say, actually, no, sometimes my body is saying just relax. Like if you don't journal today, Megan, you will be fine. Like you down. But sometimes I do feel like now I'm like in this journal wellness place. I've got to do it all again and again and again. I think when I talk about what, you know, people I've seen or what I've learned from in that sense is just, I don't know how to word it. It's really, I have to take myself back. I have to find a moment of clarity and peace. And again, I think we can learn a lot from other people. When I'm doing this podcast or my podcast, I speak to people around the world that have reached C-suite positions. And so these are people that have been and done the failures and come out the other side. And I can read all the books, I can practice all the self-care, but what I'm learning from those people is so invaluable because I'm seeing where they potentially messed up, where they failed, what challenges they faced, and how they came out the other side. And there is nothing more inspiring than learning from other people's stories, I don't think. Like you could Google a lot of what I'm saying, but there's something more valuable about engaging with a podcast or hearing it from a person's voice themselves.
I think you're absolutely right. You've got such a wise head on such a young shoulders. It's fascinating to listen to you, and I wish at times that I'd had that wise head on my shoulders at the age of 28. Maybe life would have been a little bit easier if I'd learnt some of these lessons a little bit earlier. So congratulations to you. So is there someone in particular that has inspired you? Is there someone that you're emulating? Have you looked at someone and gone, no, that's who I want to be like?
I find this question, I actually, this is the only one that really, really got me stuck, and I started Googling. I find this question really, I think for me, and people want to hear who is there out there that I can now go and watch. And so when I hear people on the podcast, and it's totally in their favor to say, my mum inspires me, but I do think sometimes, is that really what people want to hear? I think if I'm being totally honest, there isn't one person that inspires me. It's the women I speak to every single day that are in the position I want to be. And it's what are they doing? What are they taking on board? And how can I emulate that in everything I'm doing today? And one of the biggest pieces of advice they've given me is to say yes to every single opportunity. And again, I run at that 100 miles per hour. I've started doing that. And then I'm like, gosh, now I'm burnt out because I'm saying yes to too much. So you have to find a balance in everything. You have to find a middle ground. But other people that people might know, someone like Grace Beverly, she is in her mid-20s. She hosts a podcast. She has a couple of businesses. I think what she puts out there is really insightful. And she's very much honing in and practicing on just being unapologetically her online, which I really love. Anyone that is very much their natural selves online is really inspiring. And yeah, I think that's primarily comes to mind. As a lady I met on the podcast, and we are so connected, and I'd love, she inspires me. I'm going to give her a shout out. It's Victoria Fabio, and there isn't anything in particular she's done other than taught me that there are really good women out there, really great women leaders that do have your best interests at heart, and it just takes connecting with that one person to really wake you up and be like, right, okay, it is okay to trust a little bit. It's okay to give a bit of yourself away to the people that have earned it.
I love that. That's so good. And I really look forward to watching your career flourish over the next few years and see just exactly how far you can get. So we've got some of our listeners are young women and they're just starting out in their careers. So if you were able to go back and give yourself, your 18-year-old self, some advice, what advice would that be? Because you're different from what you were like at 18. So what advice would you give yourself? And so also what advice would you give others that are setting out, and specifically in the digital world?
I wrote a list of this, and it actually concerned me how much I would tell my younger self. I'm like, oh gosh, what does this mean? The number one thing on my list, and it sounds a bit like bleh, I think, but it's immensely invaluable for me, is just picking up business books sooner, reading sooner. I used to complain as a child that I couldn't read because it would give me headaches. Like I was always in the opticians. It's so silly. And now I'm like, reading is the best gift. Like learning as much as I can. I'm a sponge. I wish I'd done that sooner. I wish I tried new things sooner. Like if I was to say to my younger self now, it would be have a plan and a path, but dabble in other things to see if something else excites you too. Like I maybe would have taken a different course at college. I would have tried different things that gave me a buzz and not just parties and alcohol. I would have tried skiing. I would have tried adventure and adrenaline rushes of like nature's gift. I really am very much. I said to my partner the other day, we went on a hike, and I said, it makes me sad to think that in this day and age of everything we see online with mental health, we know that it really does detriment young people. But we're taught that the answer in most cases, and it is very, very useful. I've been down this path myself, but is to have antidepressant medication and things like that. And I think when you start pushing those things out into the world that actually change your genetic makeup, the chemical imbalance in your brain, that going on a walk now all of a sudden feels very, very insignificant. Like, what can a walk actually do for my mental health if you're saying that this magic pill is going to change the wiring in my brain? Like, literally, how is a walk or journaling going to do anything for me? And it really belittles those little things in life that are so, so valuable. And I wish I'd learned that sooner, that not to pay too much attention to what I'm seeing online and what I'm being sold, and actually try little things just to see if they work, because I would have surprised myself a lot sooner on how much getting out in the sun first thing in the morning or starting my day earlier than sleeping in would really, really change my outlook.
Great advice. Fantastic. Well, thank you, Megan. That was awesome. So I'm going to invite you back next week, if that's okay. So we'll talk more. And next week we're going to talk about leveraging the various online platforms a little bit more, go into a little bit more depth on that. To give our listeners some more information on that. So thank you ever so much. I really appreciate it, and we'll speak next week. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
See you next episode. After all, it is your brand, your story, and your success, because Ariel and I know you matter in your business.
Thank you for listening to the You Matter in Business podcast. Please follow, share, like, and comment. We would love to hear from you. This podcast is sponsored by Ariel Faith Photography and Enrich Life Coaching. The show notes provide more information on how to contact Ariel and Miriam and any guest speakers who share in our journey together.